there will be people, of course, who will say this doesn't make sense. But I know Dan Greaney, and this project makes sense to me. Dan has something to say. He's got a big heart. He's putting it into this. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce my favorite Republican candidate for president, Dan Greaney! My fellow Americans. Let's go with that. It's a classic. I am honored to be here with you today to announce my candidacy for the presidency. And unlike the current president, I didn't have to pay actors to come to my announcement. Thank you, Lord Vader, for turning out. Elsa, always a pleasure. Uncle Sam, who knew? I'm honored. And of course, embarrassed, right? I mean, as Brent, I think, made clear, it's pretty stupid, right? It's pretty ridiculous for me to be running for president. It's the sort of thing that a cartoon dad might do. Somebody like, Peter Griffin. Peter Griffin. If Meg didn't talk him out of it, and Lois, and Stewie would be rooting him on. It is a little bit ridiculous. But as Brent said, it's not a joke. And while I wrote for The Simpsons, I actually still write for The Simpsons. Comedy isn't just about the laughs. Comedy is about truth. And at The Simpsons, I think one of the things I tried to do, one of the things we all tried to do, was to say the truth about American life, to look behind the humbug and, hoopla, and say the truth about America with love and humor in a way that people saw and connected to. And that is what I hope to do here. So, yes, it is a bit absurd, but it's not a joke. And, in fact, it's an act of conscience. And, you may have your doubts about my qualifications. God knows I do too. But I pick up my phone and I see the latest news about the latest use of our military to attack a country for no good reason, the latest indictment of a law-abiding American, the latest abuse of a detainee, the latest grotesque act of theft and fraud from our treasury, the latest, so much. The latest attack on the foundations, the very foundations of our health, our prosperity, and our freedom. And I think, my doubts vanish. And I think, those guys, they don't say, why am I qualified? Who, me? Why do I get to destroy the institutions that, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and many generations of Americans built? Institutions that in many ways made us the leader of the world. No, they don't worry about the qualification. They just do it. They go for it. They're doers. You got to give them credit for that. And, if they can do it, I think then that leaves us with the question of, well, what do we do? Do we just sit there helplessly? What do I do? Do I sit there helplessly watching these people destroy, everything that my father and many millions of other Americans fought for? Or do I do something about it? And this was the something. It's a big swing. I like a big swing. So here I am. So the question is, what am I going to do about it, right? How am I going to fix the mess we're in? Well, someone once said, I alone can fix it. That someone was Donald Trump. We all know how that turned out. What I know is that I alone cannot fix it. I alone lack the talents and abilities, expertise to fix the myriad problems that we face as a society, problems that pre-existed the current administration, the problems that they've made infinitely worse. But I believe, and I will go so far as to say I know, that we as a nation have more than enough talent in our 340 million brilliant, multiracial, diverse, that's right, I said it, diverse. Yes, our country, our amazing country, we have the talents, we have the people of goodwill to solve these problems. And the role of the president is not to loot the public treasury and degrade us all. It's to establish values and set a vision. What are those values? What is that vision? That value is basically one single value, which is the proposition contained in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal. And I think we can safely update that to all people. And so that is it. I'm going all in on that proposition. That is what America's about. And frankly, I find that idea very beautiful. I do. I find it, I would even use the word sacred. I think we were blessed to have this sacred, profound truth be embodied in a system of government, even if only as an aspiration. Never happened before. Kind of amazing. It's a work in progress, but it's a great blessing that I think we have to safeguard. And I think it falls, as Abraham Lincoln said in the Gettysburg Address, which he wrote on a train, on an envelope on his way over. He said, it falls to us, the living, to continue the unfinished work, so the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not vanish from the earth. So that is my value is the equal dignity of all people. My policy is the restoration of democracy as a means for realizing that principle in life, in history. The sacred break that humanity got, that a system of government was created that actually tries to reflect the dignity and value of human beings. And democracy seems to be the only principle which actually reflects that. So I think it's important to defend democracy. And so my priority as a policy would be to restore and defend democracy. I think democracy is under attack and has in many ways been demolished by a rogue Supreme Court, by a lawless president, and by the cliques of billionaires that they work for. So my policy program would be first and foremost to restore democracy by expanding the Supreme Court. Sure. I would term limits to the Supreme Court. I would also seek to narrow their jurisdiction legislatively to remove constitutional questions from their purview. That's a good word. And then I would also seek to restore the rule of law by imposing accountability for the lawlessness of the Trump administration and his accomplices. And that would be, I think it's, I don't, without fear or favor, I don't relish the idea of people paying for their crimes, but the rule of law requires it. So it has to be done. And finally, I would, seek to reduce the influence of money in politics, through every legal avenue, both transparency legislation, the oft talked about Amendment for Citizens United, but also in a very practical sense, to just refuse all corporate and PAC money myself. Not that it's pouring in. But at running as a Republican, I would say to the other Republican candidates, they could remove the influence of money in politics just by matching this. If all the presidential candidates simply forswore all corporate and PAC money, we could cut to the chase. We wouldn't need a Citizens United. So, I'm throwing the ball's in your court, guys. And ladies, who knows who's going to turn up for that. All right, so that is an attempt to restore democracy. That's my policy priority. And then as we restore democracy, I want to do the stuff that we all want. It's crazy. We have a set of policies that poll 60, 70, 80%, both parties, Republicans and Democrats. Everybody wants this stuff, and our system is not giving it to us. So it's not anything very exciting, but it's what we want, which is universal health care, safe schools, support for higher education, affordable housing, a healthy environment. We all want this stuff, and our system, the crazy paralysis created by this ideological war has prevented us from getting it. So this is an attempt to reach out to Americans of goodwill on all parts of the political spectrum, including the many famous Bernie Trump voters. And I know that Republicans have all these same cares as everybody else and all the same values as everybody else. And I don't really care that there's a fringe element in the Republican Party that plays to people's worst instincts. Most Republicans are fine people. They want the same stuff everybody wants. So, I hope that we can have a progressive Republican movement, and even if we'll see where it leads. It's an option. It's an option, folks. So if you share, so I alone can't do it, but together I think we can. And if you share my commitment to equality, to democracy, and the optimistic, problem-solving spirit of Teddy Roosevelt, I invite you all to join my movement and create an America that works for all, including Darth Vader. Thank you.